truck, immediately Googled some of your music and was listening as I drove back to my house, listening to the music. Absolutely wonderful. For those who don't know, last night, Dan Barker gave a benefit concert, a Freethinkers concert, and played some of his music. And it was just absolutely beautiful. And I'm sure people in this room could testify to that. Wonderful, wonderful gathering that is. So this is the second part of our speaker series. There's plenty of seats up front or over in the corner over there. If you're just coming into the room, we'll put up some more chairs. It's always a good sign when I had to go find more chairs. So this is the second part of our speaker series, supported by the Puffin Foundation. And thanks to Puffin for making this possible through their generous donations to help us bring in these speakers. The point of this, of course, is that, can you still hear me? Yep. The point of this, of course, is that occasionally we need to think about ideas much more fully. Like we have a variety of ideas and opinions, and we have talks, and occasionally a subject is worthy of more exploration. And so we decided to experiment with a speaker series this year in which we can bring in various topics and speakers from across the United States who thought long and hard of these things. In fact, the gentleman who's up here, Dan Barker, is going to be giving his story in a minute and talking about his stuff as one of the co-presidents of the Freedom from Religion Foundation. But it's good that we bring in people who have thought about these things deeply. When we decided to do the speaker series, we knew that there were people across the United States who really did know a lot about this and frequently taught. And I thought, I'm just going to ask them. And I asked them, and every single one of them said yes. We also were going to have Dr. Stephen Green of Willamette University, who's written a book on church-state separation. It was well known, and then he broke his foot. So he could not be here, but we wish him well. But everybody else who said hello and welcome and that they would be part of this says not only how important this topic is to us, but how important it is to them that they would take out of their busy schedules to come here to TNEC to participate and do this. So because we're having a speaker series, we're kind of changing up our order of service than we normally do. So my apologies to that, but welcome. And I want to just start by gathering everybody. So here's, if you don't mind, could you, if you feel like it, and you don't have to, could you stand up for a second? If you want to. And what I'd like for you to do is to take 3 tiny little steps backwards. Because recently in our country, we've taken some backward steps. We've had further assaults against women's right to control her own body. We've had frequent attacks now against the LGBTQ community and stuff. And so the question is, to regain our footing and to move forward, how would we do this? And so what I want you to do is to turn to someone next to you, and then you can sit down again. How can we as a nation move forward again and take some steps? So please turn to someone what steps we would need to take. And those who are online could do the same thing. And I ask our online host to do. What do we need to do? That's why I have you here.
Zoom audience, I've been asked to mute you all for the entire presentation, so we'll skip this part. Good morning, all. If you do want to speak, though, you can raise your hand during the presentation, and I will ask you to unmute.
And you can take a seat if you want to. Just give us 2 minutes.
Hi, David.
Good. Everybody could take a seat, please. Hey, Marianne, settle down there now. Come on now. Don't make me have to call the cops again. Okay. That's the problem, right? So for those of you who are new here or listening online, Ethical culture is about finding a way to put our beliefs into action, that we wanted to create spaces that avoided what's called the divided conscience. Whereas when you go into some other places on a Sunday morning or a Thursday or a Friday or whatever that gathering is, sometimes you had to catch your thoughts at the door. And we wanted to be at a place where we could bring our whole selves and to think about these things openly and as freely as possible. But it's not just the words that matter to us, it's also the actions, it's the deeds that we do and how the things that we could do to put those things into action. So that little kind of tiny little thing where you just took a couple of steps backward and thought about how to go forward is things that we would ask all of us to do, to put our words into action and to live our ethics. We don't believe that ethics exist in some kind of outside realm somewhere. If we don't do them, they don't exist. And so putting that into action, I know that justice exists in the world to the extent that we are just. I know that compassion and caring exists in the universe to the extent that we are just and compassion and caring as well. And that's the actions that we try to take into place. This is a statement on purpose of what ethical culture is all about. Ethical culture is a fellowship of people who seek clarification of the values of life. We cherish freedom of the mind and freedom of conscience. We affirm the worth and dignity of every person. We strive to emphasize ethics in our interactions with others. The Ethical Society is an organization that believes it is up to humans to make a difference in the world. And as me as a biocentrist working in collaboration with the rest of being. We practice deed before creed, meaning it's what you do in life than rather what you believe that makes you an ethical person. Meetings are open to everyone. As a community, we are committed to making a difference, bringing out the best in ourselves and others, exploring ethical ideas, addressing social issues, and celebrating, as we did last night, life and community. And with that, we have some great musicians who gathered together, and I'm gonna let Eric introduce them and the music.
Great, thank you, Kurt. This is an original song. We debuted it last month, and we're really honored to be asked to come back and play it again. And I'm really glad to have my friends Michael Miller and Melissa Uoka. You can sometimes see them play out as Hurry Slowly at the old 76 House, other times at the Threefold Cafe and elsewhere. So you can always keep an eye out for Hurry Slowly, which is their duet. The name of the song is Where in the World Have You Gone? And it's, oh, they're not hearing me on Zoom, of course. Thank you. And so for those of you in Zoom land, I'll say I'm really happy to have my friends Michael Miller and Melissa Uoka, who oftentimes play as Hurry Slowly. You can see them in various venues around the area. This song, it's a song called Where in the World Have You Gone? And it's a song especially for parents who watch their children grow and sometimes change in ways that they're not prepared for. So thank you very much.
And I just wanted to add that Eric didn't mention this is his original song. And we collaborated together to bring it out into the world and give it birth. Okay, thank you. Where in the world have you gone? My precious young daughter, my beautiful son. Both of you once were babes in my arms, but now I don't know where you are. You're so far, and I can't protect you from harm. Where in the world have you gone? What screaming demons are chasing you on? I beg you to tell me the things I got wrong, because I forgot what it's like to be young. I forgot what it's like to be young. Living on my own, I'm all alone, no one to phone. Doing as I please, I ride the breeze, escape the squeeze. Out here on the road, I am at home. Underneath the sky, I live my life. Try and bind me, you won't find me. Will you ever learn? I'll be driving, ever climbing, never to return. You carry your heart like a stone. The world is so heavy, so let me atone. It's much harder than you could have known. There's a place in my heart that no matter how far, you can always call home. You can always call home. You can always call home. You can always call home.
Eric performed that for us a few weeks ago. It was so lovely. I asked him to bring it back. Isn't that great? What a lovely thing. You can always call home. Yeah. I won't even attempt to translate this into this Turkish. I won't try and say it. Maybe our resident linguist Vito and others could help me. Do you speak any Turkish or all the other languages? No, right. So he's a linguist, so he has all this expertise. There's an expression in Turkey that literally means you cannot move a ship with words. You cannot move a ship with words. That's their kind of expression. Kind of like what we would say is that, you know, your actions do speak louder to your words. I think it's important before we begin to remember that once again, a massive earthquake happened in Turkey and Syria. Over 20,000 people died instantly or have died crushed under materials and going and could 46,000 now they're estimating. Yeah. So how do you go forward when you see things like that or hear things and then the daily assault against the Ukrainian people? We just sit there and go in silence. And so the best we can do at this point until we can figure out all the other ways that we can help is just to remember the tragedy has struck again and to think about that. And I just wanted to take a moment during our gathering to make sure that we were acknowledging that and not just moving on. I'd like to introduce our speaker. We're going to allow him to speak and then allow for you to ask questions and about this, because I think he's got a lot of important things to say. I read his story online also, and after this concert, I find him even more fascinating because the music itself, for those who listened to it last night, was not mean or hateful. It was just loving. It was respectful. It was forgiving. And all of these things, and this is a person I've known since then and looking at his life and watching him on television, has taken a lot of punches for his beliefs, and yet just responds with this beauty to that, which I thought was really lovely, Dan. I just want to say that from the beginning. He became a teenage evangelist starting at 15 years of age. He was already out there as a Christian evangelist. He received a degree in religion from Azusa Pacific University and was ordained to the ministry by the Standard Community Church in California in 1975, or well before I was born. Joe. He served as associate pastor in 3 California churches: Arcadia Friends Church, which is a Quaker congregation, Glen Grove Assembly of God in Hacienda Heights, and Standard Christian Center, an independent charismatic church loosely affiliated with the Christian Church, or the Disciples of Christ as they're known, in Standard, California. He was a Protestant ministry in Mexico for a total of 2 years. So he went out actually outside the United States and preached there as well. He preached for a total of 19 years from various pulpits. He maintained an ongoing touring musical ministry, including 8 years of full-time cross-country evangelism. An accomplished pianist, definitely an accomplished pianist, a record producer, arranger, and songwriter. He worked with Christian music companies extensively. For more than 2 decades, Dan was accompanist, arranger, and record producer for Manuel Bonilla, the leading Christian singer in the Spanish-speaking world. He accomplished, he accomplished on piano such Christian personalities as Pat Boone, Jimmy Rogers, remember the Lawrence Welk Show, and gospel songwriter Audrey Meyer, and was a regular guest on Southern California's Praise the Lord TV show, which is a Spanish show. I take it you're fluent in Spanish, of course. He announced his atheism, however, publicly in January of 1984. So think of that, from Christian evangelist to atheism publicly. He tells a story in the book Losing Faith in Faith, which was printed in 1992, and Godless in 2008, and he's brought copies of his books back there. Dan was the public relations director of the Freedom from Religion Foundation from 1987 to 2004. He was elected co-president of the foundation, Freedom from Religion Foundation, with Annie Laurie Gaylor in 2004, and whom he co-hosts of Free Thought Radio, which is a national weekly talk show, and Free Thought Matters, a national weekly TV show. He is contributing editor of Free Thought Today and is involved with the foundation church-state lawsuits, which he can talk to you about. He regularly travels the country and the world giving lectures, performing concerts like last night, and participating in debates with theists, meaning at college and university campuses. He actually flew up here from Daytona Beach, Florida, where he was involved in a debate, got on a plane after that, flew up here, did a benefit concert for us, speaking this morning, and then flying back out to Wisconsin. So without further ado, I'd like to call up Dan Barker. Thank you.
So somebody told me I was here before in the 80s. Because on, no? Does it want to be turned on?
Yeah, probably.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
There we
Does that work? Okay. So apparently I was here back in the 80s, and I barely remember that. I gave a talk, so some of you might have been here. Were you?
Those people over there.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Because we've been members for only about a little over 20 years.
Oh, okay. Oh, was it the 90s? Okay. I think maybe I took a bus over from Port Authority. I think that's what happened that day. But what a pleasure. And I know there are some Freedom from Religion Foundation members here who get our newspaper and who read our materials. So it's nice to see all of you. And as was said, I used to be a preacher. And so it's going to be hard for me to cut things short. You know, preachers, you know, the word reverend is a typo. The first letter used to be an N. But I'll try to keep it down. If you're interested in my story, I do have some copies of the book Godless, How an Evangelical Preacher Became One of America's Leading Atheists. And in the foreword to that book, Richard Dawkins wrote, Dan Barker wasn't just a preacher. He was the kind of preacher you would not want to sit next to on a bus. And that was me. I was so confident, so sure. You know that guy on campus with the Bible, you know that person, you've seen somebody like that. Was me. you would not have liked me very much back then. This crowd probably wouldn't. I thought everything was directed by God, and it was not an accident that you sat on that seat next to me. It was divine providence that God wanted you to hear the good news of Jesus. I wish one of you had sat by me. What would you have said? That would have been fun. I got very little flack. You know, when you're in the ministry, everybody kind of loves you. You don't get much, much disapproval. So I would suggest you don't have to argue with them, obviously, but at least let them know that you disagree. At least let them know that not everybody agrees with them or treats them with the same unearned respect that they expect to get from them. So you can read more about my story about why I changed. Mostly it was intellectual and philosophical, because I learned that what I was preaching just didn't make sense, wasn't true. I explained why, the resurrection of Jesus, and the lack of a coherent definition for a God, the lack of any good evidence for a God, the lack of agreement among believers about the moral principles or the character of this God, the lack of a good reply to the problem of evil, and the lack, basically the lack of a need for a belief in God. Hundreds of millions of good people lead happy, loving, moral, productive lives without that. And so it's kind of like, when I was an evangelist, before I could get people saved, I had to first convince them they were damned. Then, if you thought you were damned, if you had a low self-image, if you thought you were depraved and going to hell, then I could sell you the Band-Aid. It's like a doctor who cuts people and say, here, I can sell you a Band-Aid, right? So that's kind of what religion is. It's teaching people they're bad, they don't deserve. And when you teach children that, I think that's a kind of form of child abuse, that children grow up thinking, oh no, I don't want to go to hell, I don't want to be punished. When I think people are born not with original sin, but with original good, and we nurture that as we raise our children and all that. But anyway, I left I sent that letter out in 1984. A few months later, I got called to Oprah Winfrey Show to be a guest with Ann Gaylor, who's the principal founder of the Freedom from Religion Foundation, and her daughter, Annie Laurie Gaylor. Oprah was doing a show about atheism, and it's a long story, and Oprah's producer said, do you know someone else with a story? And they said, well, there's this young guy in California who just left the ministry. So just a few months later, I was on TV for the first time ever, speaking these words that when you leave the ministry, what happens to you? You just sort of fade away. What happens to preachers and rabbis and imams that leave? In fact, there's a group called the Clergy Project that exists now, that was formed by philosopher Daniel Dennett, scientist Richard Dawkins, and myself back in 2011. There's now almost 1,300 former clergy in that group who can kind of talk with each other and compare notes, and look it up online, clergyproject.org. But at the time, I didn't know. I thought I was the only one. And here I was on TV, and it was a great show. You can find it online. Look up Oprah and Barker, and back in 1984. The first time I was saying these things before a hostile audience. When you're a preacher, you're always preaching to a loving audience, usually, and you don't have to be too careful about what you say. But here I was saying things, and that audience was packed with Bible thumpers. And in fact, that was the first day I had knowingly met any other atheists, Ann and Annie Laurie. You can see the day that we met each other. Annie Laurie and I are married now. You can see the day we met, which is pretty cool. But this hostile audience, and I realized, I like this. This is great. Because finally I'm saying something that there's actually a differential here. We're actually getting an honest response from this audience, a real honest response, like it or not. So I just never stopped. Maybe once a preacher, always a preacher. And we got married in 1987, and I worked on the staff until 24, and then we became co-presidents of the Freedom from Religion Foundation at that time. The Freedom from Religion Foundation started in the 70s, went national in 78. When I joined, there was about 1,000 or 1,500 members at the time. And today we have 40,000 members, which is a great accomplishment. It should be 100,000, but some of you have probably seen our ad with Ron Reagan on national TV, where he says, Ron Reagan, lifelong atheist, not afraid of burning in hell. And he's been really sweet. He redid it for us. It's been running on 60 Minutes and on Rachel Maddow and on Comedy Central. And And a lot of people, we get a lot of hate mail from it, you know, you can imagine. But a lot of people saying, I'm so glad to hear somebody saying something refreshing in that. So we just passed 40,000 members. We have our headquarters is in Madison, Wisconsin. We expanded our building, not only with brand new offices, but we have a meeting space now with a brand new Steinway piano in there. If you want to come visit us, I'll play you some tunes on this. It's a Model A, which is it's the smallest Steinway that counts as a concert that you can put on a concert stage, and it's in our room, so it's pretty neat. And so we have 10 full-time attorneys right now working for state church separation, because FFRF has two purposes. The first one is to keep state and church separate, to honor that really important First Amendment principle of the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause. So we take lawsuits under that purpose. Mostly what we do is we send letters of complaint around the country. We send thousands of letters around to high school principals, to postmasters, to governors, county board members. Anytime there's a violation of the separation of state and church, we complain about it. And it's not like we're running around the country looking for it. We don't have time for that. But it's you notice it and you contact us. We have a legal staff, and if you see something in your area, you can go online and do the report of an abuse, and our staff will get right on it. And in fact, for most of the issues, we pretty much have the letters already written, because there's so many of these issues we've done so often. There's template letters. And so there's about 40 different issues, and we can take your complaint and pretty much fill in the blanks, dear principal so-and-so, this violation, and quoting the law, the precedent, and the Supreme Court and all that stuff. Although that's getting different now in the last year or so. That's changing, and our strategy has to change a bit as well. But the letters are very important. And so about 20% of those letters result in a clear-cut victory right away, which maybe doesn't sound like a lot, but each one of those could have been a lawsuit and didn't have to be. If you can write a letter and inform a superintendent of a school district or inform somebody else in the government that they're breaking the law and here's why, often they will say, thank you, we didn't know that, and they'll stop it, and they'll tell the high school teacher to stop doing what they're doing, or they'll tell the postal carrier, or whatever it is. And so that's kind of nice. That's a way to kind of enforce the law. You know, if you're driving on the highway and you're breaking the speed limit, what happens? If there's a highway patrol around, there's an enforcement, right? And so you might get cited. But if somebody's violating the law of the Constitution, where's the highway patrol for that? Who stops somebody? Who does that? Well, our government doesn't really have enforcement for that. It's groups like us. It's people like you. We have to do it. And they know from our history that we have taken and will take legal action. And so their legal counsel, when they get a letter from us, they know they'll look us up, or they'll just know, oops, we are legally vulnerable here. Do we want to spend sparse resources in our school district to defend a losing lawsuit, or should we stop this? So it's kind of nice that we can kind of be the watchdog, is what we call ourselves, to try to keep on top of that. So our staff is busy monitoring. We also have a full-time lobbyist in DC, and we have a strategic response team that is tracking legislation at the federal level and at the state level. And we just had a report come out of more than 1,000 bills we've been tracking. There's a great system called Quorum that helps us track all that stuff. And so then we can notice, like, if there's a bill in your area you may not know about, we can inform members, by the way, this bill, you might want to go to the hearing, you might want to testify, you might want to oppose this bill or support the bill. Sometimes it's a good bill that we want to do. So we're watching those things as well. We cooperate with a lot of other groups, Americans United and American Humanists and Secular Coalition for America. You're going to have a speaker here in a couple of weeks, Jeremiah Kamara, who's on the board of the Freedom from Religion Foundation. And Jeremiah and I are good friends. We met in the Philippines giving a free thought talk. And he's a wonderful filmmaker, by the way. I don't know if he'll talk about that for you. But
He's coming and showing his film.
oh, great.
Yep.
Oh,
Here at the society.
Oh, he's great. So anyway, so we like to cooperate as much. Each group maintains its identity, but we also cooperate not only just with other free thought state church groups, but we also cooperate with religious groups. There are many religious groups that are in favor of state church separation. There's a group called Christians Against Christian Nationalism, for example, which is headed by Amanda Tyler, who's with the Baptist Joint Committee for Religious Liberty. Their group, the Baptist Joint Committee and the Freedom from Religion Foundation, we co-produced a report. And we even had her on our show, and she was very gracious. She's coming on an atheist show to talk about the dangers of Christian nationalism, the dangers of the religious right, because not all believers are painted with the same brush. Many of them understand that it's important for their faith that the religion be neutral, the religion not get involved. Because if the government's pushing my religion this week, whose religion are they pushing next week? And there are even some very conservative believers would be conservative on abortion or gay rights and all that, also agree with us that the government should not be forcing a position or belief, but that their position should be argued with persuasion and with logic and reason and with example, and not with the force of the government. So there's a lot of allies out there. It's not just a bunch of angry atheists, hitting Congress or hitting the government, that we don't like religion. There's a whole lot of religious people as well who agree that, at least on paper, most of the denominations support the separation of church and state, because they know that when you mix religion and government, they both get dirty. They should be separated. There should be a total private realm where we are free to assemble and advertise our beliefs and have our radio shows, but the government itself has to go like this. You guys talk among yourselves. The government's not going to get involved. So we co-produced this joint report with the Baptist Joint Committee for Religious Liberty, specifically about the January 6th insurrection, because the influence of the Christian nationalists on an insurrection has been downplayed. It was very prominent. If you saw any of the footage, you see the crosses, you saw the Jesus signs, you saw the Jesus pictures, you saw the Christian flag going into the Capitol building. And you saw them praying, and you saw the Jericho marchers going around blowing the shofars, and there was all there. And Jeremy Raskin, was on the committee, the January 6th committee, he knew all that, and Jared Huffman as well, the congressman from California. But for political reasons, and we can't say this for sure, all right, but the speculation is that Cheney on the committee wanted to downplay any criticism of religion in that report. Although it did come out, of course, within the reporting that Christian nationalism was a big part of the impetus behind that insurrection. So we produced a joint report on that January 6th resurrection, showing the deep influence of Christian nationalism, which we oppose and which a lot of Christians oppose as well. And you can find that report online on our website and read in great detail, not only that day, but the months and the days leading up to that, all of the planning that was going into that. They're viewing it. Even prayers were said on the floor of the House and on the Senate during that insurrection. So the Christian right, the Christian nationalists, which I don't have to repeat, don't represent all Christians. They represent a right-wing version. They feel like they are losing privilege. Most of this Christian nationalism, most of it we could categorize as white Christian nationalism, or white evangelical Christian nationalism, thinking that our country was formed by white Europeans to be a Christian nation, a city built on a hill with manifest destiny. And now their privilege is being threatened. And threatened by what? Diversity, threatened by immigration, threatened by outsiders, and threatened also by the changing demographics. Right now in this country, our country is becoming less and less religious, especially among young people. And all the surveys and all the polls are showing that. In fact, PRRI just came out with a survey showing that most Americans are very nervous about Christian nationalism, even most religious people. If you say that phrase now, a year ago, the phrase Christian nationalism didn't have much traction. But then some of the members of Congress and some of the members in the Senate have been actually promoting Christian nationalism. Nowadays, that term, when you hear it, is raising some red flags, which I think is an improvement. Among young people right now, under the age of 30, more than a third of them are non-religious, which is huge. Non-religion is the fastest growing, quote unquote, religion. No, it's the fastest growing religious identification in the country right now. And other religions are shrinking. Christianity is shrinking. It's going down. Christianity, right-wing Christianity is losing the cultural wars, and they know it. They've always lost and lost and lost. They lost over prayers in the schools. They lost over creationism in the classroom. They've lost over gay rights. Every battle they fight, they're losing in the court of public opinion. They know it. They hate it. It makes them really, really angry. And I think it makes them especially dangerous right now, especially when they have control of the courts, which is a real problem right now. They had a very successful playbook of trying to, over a long term, over decades, trying to get the courts to rule in that direction. And that's why we're going to have to back up and reassess, not just us, but the other state church groups, our overall strategy, because it seems pointless now to take a case to the court, which is taking these cases it shouldn't be taking. The Coach Kennedy case never should have gone to the court, but this current conservative court, which are mostly Catholics, they are eager to grant special privilege to religion. And if we had taken the same kind of a case to them, they wouldn't have even accepted it. So we have a serious problem ahead of us. I think the religious right now, they know they're losing the privilege they used to have. And a lot of it is white evangelicalism. They know that they're not winning in the court of public opinion. They know that they want power above and beyond just persuasion, which is what we should have in this country, is persuasion. And so they're like a wounded animal in the forest that knows it's dying, and it wants to take everything it can down with it as it's dying. They are dying. And what's happening in the United States seems to parallel what happened in Europe. Europe, after centuries of fierce religious violence, the 30 Years' War and the Holy Wars and the fighting and the bloodshed. Today, most Europeans are pretty much secular. They have these beautiful empty churches over there. There's more tourists than there are worshipers in these churches. In fact, Annie Laurie and I when we go to Europe, we sometimes visit churches, and we're not there to worship. We're there to look at, in Barcelona, Gaudi's cathedral. Have you seen that? Isn't that an incredible work of art? He was a deep believer, by the way. He thought he was expressing God's views. But in Europe, most the churches are supported by tax dollars now. About 1% in many of these countries support the established church. And most Europeans, especially in the Nordic countries, in Denmark, only 4% of the people believe in God. About half of them would call themselves cultural Christians. They'll get married in the church, but they don't really believe. It's kind of like Jews in America. Jews believe and they respect the heritage and they love the food and grandma's prayers, all that. But when it comes to the actual theology, they don't really. There's an old joke in America. What do you call a Jew who doesn't believe in God? A Jew, yeah. Right. I'm glad they're saying it. I mean, so the demographics are changing, and my grandsons in their 20s, they're voting, they care. And when this next generation starts to vote, they don't vote like they should. And I think if we can put our energy into encouraging the younger people to get involved politically, to run for office, to vote, we're seeing more and more secular elected officials now. There's a new organization called ASEO, the Association of Secular Elected Officials, which is gathering at the state level, at any level of government, officials who are openly humanist, atheist, agnostic, secular, to get together to share their views. And they're coming out and they're speaking out and they're blocking legislation. Now, in the last few years, there's finally in the U.S. House of Representatives, you probably all know this, there's a Free Thought Caucus now in the U.S. House of Representatives, started by Jamie Raskin of Maryland and by Jared Huffman. They're co-chairs, Jared Huffman of the 2nd District of California. And they just welcomed some new members. They lost some in the last election, but I think you can go online, look at the Free Thought Caucus of the House of Representatives. And they're not all atheists. Some of them are believers, but they really care about state-church separation. They have events and they invite us sometimes to share. They want to know what you're thinking. The Free Thought Caucus, it wants to have input from us about the government and what bills they might want to propose, bills promoting science, bills opposing religious discrimination, and so on. And one really fun thing, I think I'll end with this and we'll go to questions. One really fun thing we were able to do, working with the Free Thought Caucus and Jamie Raskin and others. You all know about Thomas Paine, right? America's forgotten founder, the person who named the United States of America, the person who wrote Common Sense that Washington distributed to the troops, which motivated the troops to fight for independence. Thomas Paine, a great American patriot, he seems to have been forgotten because he was not only critical of Washington, which was a no-no back then, to criticize Washington, the big, to his credit, Washington did not want to be king. He wanted to respect constitutional government. But also Thomas Paine was critical of religion. He wrote his book, The Age of Reason, which was very critical of the Bible. He was not an atheist. He was a deist of his day. And so because of that and other reasons, Thomas Paine has kind of been forgotten. Well, there's now a Thomas Paine Memorial Association that has marshaled through Congress a bill. We went through Jamie Raskin's office, and a bill to erect a permanent monument to Thomas Paine in Washington, D.C. There's never has been one. There's Washington, there's Jefferson, there's Lincoln, there's all these monuments. There's even foreigners. There's Lafayette there in D.C., So why not Thomas Paine, the great founder? So our lobbyists, and you can't imagine the number of hoops you have to jump through to get a resolution like that passed. But they finally got it written and it got approved. But before it had to even be presented to Congress, it had to go through all these other committees. We went to a national, I forget what they call it, NCMAC, National Committee for Monuments and that. And we presented the case to them and they voted unanimously. Yes, this is a great thing to have a monument to Thomas Paine, the forgotten founder. Afterwards, maybe I shouldn't say this, but afterwards, one of the committee members said, I'm a member of FFRF, So that was kind of neat. And because and it has bipartisan support, Republicans and Democrats, because the founder, a patriot, an American patriot, right? And so the bill was introduced with bipartisan support. The bill was passed through both houses, and last December, Biden signed that bill into law. So there's a lot of steps to go still. But those things don't happen automatically. It happens because people are lobbying and pushing and moving forward. We even have a sculptor, Zenas Froudakis, who's a world famous sculptor. He sculpted a statue of Clarence Darrow for us down at the Scopes Trial in Dayton, Tennessee, a beautiful statue. So if you've been to Philadelphia, have you seen that freedom sculpture? That figure is coming out of the wall. It's a famous sculpture of freedom. Zenas did that. So he's already got a makeup of it, and it looks like he's going to be our sculptor for this. So watch for it. And one of the stipulations of it is that no government money is spent. So we have raised the money. The money is already there to pay for it. And that was part of the bill, no government money. So the Thomas Paine Memorial Association is paying for that whole thing to happen. And there have been some various generous contributors, like the Todd Stiefel Foundation has put up a big chunk of that money for us. So watch for that. It's going to be a few years. Things go really slowly, but I could talk forever, as you know. And I think I might have said enough about the topic for today to allow time for questions. Would this be good? Okay.
So we decided to design this somewhat as a learning. So this is the idea that we could think through the ideas. You probably already have questions in your mind. We're going to have an open mic here for a second to allow people to share those questions. Questions in with a question mark. Just remember that. So they're not just going on and on and on. Peter, do you want to say how people can share online?
Sure thing, Kurt. All right. First of all, those of you on Zoom, we are running this church state series where you're all unmuted. So you can certainly raise your hand on Zoom and I will ask you to unmute and then you can share. For the rest of you, most of you already know how to raise your hand in Zoom in order to indicate that you wish to speak. If you aren't sure how to do it, or if you can't find it, click on the reactions button at the bottom of your screen. If you're on a tablet or phone, click the three dots at the bottom right of your screen and you should see it as an option. We ask you to not rely physically on waving your hand. We just may not see you. So *9 if you'd like to raise your hand, *6 if you'd like to mute or unmute. Thanks, Kurt.
And shout out to our the Ethical Culture Society of Silicon Valley, which is joining us. I'm their consulting leader also, and they're all over there in California at 8 o'clock in the morning. So hello to all of y'all as well, and thank you for participating. Once again, we try and make it so new voices or people who haven't asked a question. Maybe we've had some new guests here. We have people who have been in the society for a while. Let's just ask who'd like to ask some questions first, and we'll try and create as room for as many people, but we also can't be here all day. And we're going to take a few from in room and then a few from Zoom. Okay. So I I'm gonna go here, then over there. So Diane Kozarski, and if you could come forward if you want to or not.
Thank you for your overview. I have to point out that Thomas Paine wrote Common Sense in Fort Lee, New Jersey, and the town, which is just up the pike from us. And the town has committed to raising a bronze statue there in their little Revolutionary War commemoration park. But they're standing in line for the sculptor to get on it. So we remember Thomas Paine.
Of course.
Can you explore what it is about evangelical Christianity that makes them want to impose their vision on other people instead of just being a light on a hill? This is a fantastic belief system and way to live, and we take care of our own and be a gorgeous community that people would be drawn to, as opposed to having it shoved down their throats from above.
You've got a microphone.
Oh, I have a microphone. That's right. What do you know? So yeah, I was one of those evangelical Christians, and I believed that Jesus was Lord, which means Lord, Master of not just my life, but of the world. And not all Christians believe that, obviously. I mean, they believe it's a personal Lord for their life. But the Puritans who came over to this country, they loved religious freedom, but they loved it so much that they kept it all to themselves. It was just, you know, they believed that they were under the lordship of the world. And it's ironic, isn't it, that we fought a Revolutionary War, kicking out the master, the monarch, the sovereign, the Lord. And instead of having a top-down authority of some absolute up here, we flipped it around, we the people, which is really a wonderful experience. We the people, there's no Lord Master. And yet our species, a lot of us are still hung up with this idea that there is a kingship. And even our presidents, we tend to treat them like royalty, don't we? We tend to treat celebrities like royalty. There's something in our species that I think is pretty new in the last 6,000 years or so, this subservience of kneeling and bowing before the great authority. So many evangelicals take their Bible seriously, and they believe that he's Lord of the whole world. And the Bible hates homosexuality. Well, then they have to hate homosexuality. That's a threat to them. The Bible is even pretty racist when you think there's a chosen people. You should not intermarry with the Midianites. You should keep the master race pure. There's this whole idea of keeping yourself and your group pure, and there's all these outsiders. Evangelicals have that kind of binary brain where they're viewing themselves. They think they're being beleaguered by these outside pressures. Some of them even believe there's a real Satan. And if that's true, if you really believe those things, then this is a life and death struggle, not just for the freedom to believe what you want as you live your life, but it's like an eternal life and death struggle for those people. And they desperately need you to come on board with them. Otherwise, you're a threat to not only to their existence, but you're a threat to the privilege that they used to have when they used to control, when the church used to run the world.
Okay, we'll take one from over here, Lisa.
Hi, Dan. Thanks so much for your program last night and today. So my two questions are two things that have bothered me greatly. That one is in our schools, the Pledge of Allegiance, one nation under God. My little granddaughter, who is in first grade, rewrote the Pledge of Allegiance, and she says one nation under dogs. It was a mistake, but I love it. And the other thing is, you know, our politicians always, it seems, end with God bless you. And, you know, what do we do about that? That's, I mean, to me, that is just a put down to those of us who are atheists, don't believe in God.
So dogs usually worship humans. They were bred from wolves to be subservient and submissive to humans. But maybe dogs are something better to worship, you know, ourselves. If you have a dog, you look in their eyes, you know, there's that, you know. We had a guest on our radio and TV show recently from Michigan, Ossawell, Michigan. She's a newly elected city council member who is a non-believer. And when they did the Pledge of Allegiance and they did the prayer, she refused to stand. And the local media made a big fuss about that. Why are you not patriotic? Why are you not standing? And she says, well, I don't believe in prayer. And I don't think the government should be forcing prayer on everybody because we're a diverse community. the people who lead that community want to make it look like it's not a diverse community. They want to make it look like we're all just Christians, of course, but she's saying more and more and more people in our town are diverse and don't share those views. And she says, I'm not standing for the pledge because it has those words under God in it. I learned the Pledge of Allegiance in kindergarten in 1954, the old way. One nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Some of you learned it that way, right? And the way you first learn it is the way it seems right. Well, then the next year after Congress passed the law to divide what was indivisible with, because it was supposed to be that the colonies were indivisible now. You know, the Civil War's over, now it's a nation that's indivisible. They put these words in. And so when I went to first grade, I had to relearn it. And to this day, it sounds clunky to me. It sounds like it's interrupting the natural flow of the way it was written. And that was in the 50s. A lot of bad things happened in the 50s. Not just under God in the pledge, but in God we trust on our currency, on our paper currency. The National Day of Prayer happened at that time, you know, with Billy Graham and Eisenhower and all of that. Billy Graham had Eisenhower open the Bible to 2 Chronicles 7:14, you know, and when he took the oath of office. So a whole lot of things happened back then because why? The fear of communism, the fear of godlessness, the fear of the Russians are coming. It's amazing how the Russians have become more friendly to certain people than they used to be before. The word red used to be a scare word, right? Well, maybe for some of you blue people, it still is So we fight that, and no student has to stand. Nobody has to stand for the pledge, but often when a student sits down, and we've had some of them speak at our convention, they are persecuted, they're laughed at, sometimes they're even bullied at school because they're not getting with the program, they're not getting, so that's one of the battles that we fight. And I forgot your second question. Oh yeah. Yeah, because there's sort of a natural human instinct when you're having a meeting to solemnize it somehow. Not just to have a meeting of the people, but there seems to be something in our species that we want to have some kind of a, I don't know, a prayer, an oath, or a song, something that brings us together. And even seculars will do that. We'll have a moment of, so God is kind of a way historically that it sort of gives us a seal of approval on things, and people can't get away from that. And they think voters like it. I think they think voters want them to say that. So.
One from this side of the room, Jerry? Get these microphones. Get these microphones.
Very quickly, what do we do about a conservative Supreme Court? What's the strategy?
Well, okay, so we think not just for court packing reasons, and those may be bad or good reasons, who knows, but we think just for practical reasons, there needs to be some court reform. The court never was set at 9. There was always, it's been varied over history. So we think that the court has been packed by the religious right. They're doing the court packing right now, and that the court needs to be unpacked. And I don't know what form that will take, but some kind of either term limits or maybe expanding the number of seats, because originally it was one justice for every district. Well, now there's 13 districts. There would be a case for just for the distribution of cases that we have 13 justices. Some people make that argument. Of course, the long-term solution is political. We vote for the people we want, but the religious right has taken this decades-long strategy from their playbook of trying to pack those courts, and they have deliberately packed them. And we do know that there are 2 seats in the court right now that many people consider illegitimate, the way they were seated in the court. That's political. The court has been politicized, and of course, those members of the court are glad about that. They're conservative majority. So, and you can see from their actions taking cases that, you know, this 303 creative case that's coming up, they never should have taken that, but they wanted to take a religious case because they are viewing religious freedom as the freedom to weaponize. Religion should be used. They have the freedom to refuse to serve people. So I don't know what answer to give you. And our membership is not in agreement about what type of court reform, or if any, should be necessary. So we're all grappling with that. And maybe some of you have some ideas as well.
Okay, Peter, I'm going to turn it over to you online, and then we'll come back into the room. I saw Sam raise her hand. So Peter, if you'd like to get 3 people online.
Thank you, Kurt. First of all, great presentation, Dan. Thank you. And we have a comment from a viewer. His name is Jim Tassone. Dan, many thanks to your legal team for writing to the New Jersey Secretary of State on my behalf about the clearly unconstitutional phrase, "So help me God," in the notarized affidavit that our candidates for elective office must sign. That's from Jim Tassone. So he thanks you. I know he's listening at home. Our first question comes from Pam Berglund. Pam, I'll ask you to unmute yourself here. You need to unmute yourself, Pam.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much for this wonderful program this morning. And I wanted to put my view in here because I remember when I learned the Pledge of Allegiance, I learned the original indivisible with liberty and justice for all. And I was under the impression that when the colonies were formed because they wanted to break away from the Protestant religion. So everything that we do now is God, God, God. God bless America. We sing at every program, God bless America. Why is it God bless America? We bless America. So my question is, how do we change this in society? How do we make our beliefs understood that we can't combine church and state?
Yeah, well, I guess we keep doing what we're doing. We complain, and if we can strategically take legal action. We tried to sue over In God We Trust on the money, and the court turned us down and said we couldn't even go into court because the court said In God We Trust is not a religious phrase. So there's no violation of religion and government. And so how do you fight something like that if they just throw you out? We even commissioned a survey. 60% of Americans at least think that In God We Trust is indeed a religious phrase. And in fact, we can hardly complain about state-church separation at any level when somebody won't pull out a dollar bill and say, hey, look, we got God on our money, justifying additional abuses. So that's wrong. And it shows a lack of diversity. But you know, during wartime, people want God on their side. During the Civil War was the first time that In God We Trust was put on some of the coins because we want to have God. Even the German military had Gott mit uns, God is with us, because we are fighting a godly war. You want to have that authority of God, which you think is going to instill fear in the enemy. So we just have to keep educating and complaining, and I guess hoping to find courts. At the lower level, the courts have been pretty good. We've won a lot of cases in the lower courts, in federal court, which were then overturned in the higher courts. Not so much on the merits. Usually when we have a case that's overturned, it's overturned on standing, which means that the lower opinion has not been contradicted by the higher court. We have not been told we were wrong. We were simply told you just can't go into court. In God We Trust is not a religious phrase, so you can't sue over that, is what they say. Isn't that weird? So we keep fighting. We keep doing what we can.
Yes, next up, Ken and Terry Karp.
Hi, this is Ken, not Terry. Welcome back to the Ethical Culture Society building in Teaneck, Dan, because it was 2011 when you were here. And yes, you took a bus from New York City, and I remember it well because I met you at the bus stop. So it's great to see you back. Thanks so much for making the effort. My question is, I know you've been very involved in not only your own organization, but interacting with other organizations that are sympathetic. And you mentioned a few of them at the beginning of this talk today. What can an organization, a religious organization like ours, a congregationally based organization like ours, do to help more with the fight for church-state separation?
Well, if you're talking about going to court, you need some kind of injury. And so if you can find some kind of injury that you're being mistreated or treated unfairly compared to other religious groups, maybe there could be a case made there so that you could get into court. You just can't go into court because you don't like something. You have to show legal injury to have standing. So I don't know if there's some issue that you feel like you're being singled out or treated differently from.
Well, the sign-
But education right now is the strongest. Complain, 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 write letters. If you see a violation, for example, in this county or in this state, your church, your fellowship could write a letter to the government or to whatever, or to the committee and say, listen, we as a group, as a congregation, we oppose this or we support this legislation or this action. Make it known what your views are. So they can't say nobody's ever complained. At least you can do that. There's no harm in doing that. You can complain and complain. And sometimes when you complain, you flush out other people saying, hey, yeah, I didn't know there was a group like yours. This is great. So one of the strategies Ann Gaylor used to use was to like you want publicity, you want the media to pay attention to you, but the media doesn't care. The media wants news, right? So instead of writing some big thing to the newspaper saying, here's what we think, write a letter of complaint to some governmental official, to some mayor or to whatever, some superintendent of the schools. Write a letter of complaint asking for a response to correct this violation, and then write your press release to the media quoting from that complaint. That's news. The media can say, oh, there's an issue here, there's a controversy. Well, then let's call the school and get their point. You have a much higher chance of getting coverage in the news if you're actually reporting news, something that's a real controversy in that. So try that. Write some letters. Whoever writes, put them together. Maybe have a legal consultant give you some advice on it. Or if you want, our legal team can help as well, because we have most of those letters are already written. So you can lodge a complaint on our website, and we can help you with that. And then say, we wrote this letter and we're waiting for a response from principal so-and-so. There's news. And there you have a much likelier chance of the media picking up, because they like controversy. They like outrage. They like stories where there's something going on. They don't want to just be a mouthpiece for somebody's philosophical opinions or about, there's an opinion page and you can try that. And some of you are probably very good at doing that, but try that strategy of creating some news, and that might make a difference.
Okay, and then we have Richard Askins. Richard, you need to unmute yourself.
Hello to the Carps in Colombia, South America. So.
Okay, Richard.
Hello.
Richard, you need to unmute yourself. Oops.
He doesn't know how.
Richard has left the room. How about Hetty Grant?
All right, we're going to take one from the room then, and then we'll come back to that, okay?
Well, we do have Hetty Grant.
So we have here, then here, then here. Yeah.
Hi.
Good morning, everybody. I want to share a small victory that I had. My council meeting always started with the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silent prayer. And around 2010, I approached the mayor, and I knew that he was a devout Catholic, so I didn't think he'd want to give up the moment of silent prayer. But I asked if he could add something to it. I said, how about a moment of silent prayer or reflection? And to my delight and surprise, he readily agreed. So now all the meetings start with a moment of silent prayer or reflection.
Great, thank you for that. Now, Samantha?
Sure. So I wanted to talk a little bit like what Lisa was talking about politicians saying, oh, sure. Okay. Hello, Zoom land. So I've often wondered what it would take for a president to be able to run for office with no religion. And I know I work in a school district nearby that I am definitely a minority. And so like atheist is a word that you do not say in public. very often unless you want to get into a big thing with people. So I always think like, how could you possibly run openly? However, Pete Buttigieg and President Obama are like very hopeful steps in the progress, but I feel like atheist is a word that's still pretty in the closet.
Well, you might have noticed that when President Biden gave his remarks at the National Prayer Breakfast, which by the way is changing due to activism, they totally separated the government from the private side of that, which is a big story about all of that. Jonathan Larson with TYT uncovered a whole bunch of that. And our lobbyist has also been involved asking members of Congress to boycott it. And some of them have been boycotting this National Prayer Breakfast, which is not an official government event. But during Biden's remarks over at the visitor center that day, separated from the actual breakfast, he did mention non-believers. He put that in his talk. And so he was at least respectful. And we saw Obama did that as well. You know, he was not dissing believers, but he said we are a diverse nation. And he even acknowledged that there are non-believers. They have to know there's non-believers on their staff. They have to know that. So so I told you before, there's a new group called the Association of Secular Elected Officials. Some people are actually running openly as atheists, secular humanists, and they're getting elected. At the highest level right now, it's Jared Huffman from California. Jared Huffman was the first member of the current House to come out openly as a non-believer after he was elected there in California. And he formed the Free Thought Caucus, which are not all non-believers, obviously, but that's open to free thinkers. And then, so the big question was, what's going to happen in his next election? Now that he's come out publicly as a non-believer, well, his next election after that, he got an even higher margin, because the people of his district, they were voting for the issues, for the policies. They were voting for his positions on things, not what his personal beliefs were or not. They liked what he was doing in his community. So I think a lot of it depends on the makeup of your community, the constituents who are voting. But Megan Hunt in Nebraska, she's following Ernie Chambers, if you know about the Chambers case. And Megan Hunt is an open atheist, feminist, and she single-handedly filibustered to block an anti-abortion bill in her state. And she gets the credit for that, opposing the religious right. And she's unafraid. And there's more and more around the country that are starting to do that. 20, 30 years ago, you wouldn't have seen that. But now we're starting to see some budding bravery amongst non-believers. They're not all atheists. Some of them are just, you know, secular humanists or secularists or skeptics at different levels. And next week on our radio show, which we're going to record Thursday, we're going to talk with Leonard, who's the head of the ASEO, about why this group started. He's in Georgia, but they're all over the country. So there are elected officials who are openly non-religious now, which is pretty new. And we're watching to see what happens with their next election. So if you know about them, vote for those people.
Okay, we only have a few more minutes. We're going to do this very quickly. If you could ask your question quickly, sir. Thank you.
I was just wondering if anybody is tackling the RLUIPA law that was pushed through mainly by evangelical Christians, but it's wreaked havoc in a lot of communities like Lakewood, New Jersey, Monroe, New York, and all of Rockland County. Religious land use. It basically says that religions can push through and put, for example, synagogues in single-family neighborhoods, take it off the tax revenues, and there's virtually nothing you can do. The only recourse people have is maybe that there's problems with water or things like that, but basically they've taken away any right from communities and neighborhoods to stop what's mostly been Orthodox and Hasidim moving into neighborhoods and taking over the neighborhoods, taking over school boards, taking over everything, basically.
And not just that, getting preferential treatment for, how do you pronounce it? Eruv or Eruv? Eruv, which it seems so silly, doesn't it? You put a wire around and now you're not outside anymore, you know, but a lot of communities are accommodating that. And we've complained about some of those issues. We had an issue in, is it South Carolina? where the government was just going to give this land to this church so they could build a road straight to their church. And we lost that. We tried, but there were other factors involved. And so, yes, we have to keep an eye on it. And if you don't know about it and don't complain about it, we're not going to change things.
We're just going to take one more question. We're going to take a questions online. I'm so sorry. Yep. Go ahead, Jim.
Hi, Dan. Thanks very much. I'm going to be mindful of the question mark at the end of this. But
Please do.
full disclosure, it's going to include a bit of a statement and opinion. Do you think that perhaps we might be better off, rather than couching this as a conflict between believers and non-believers, that we might be well advised to describe ourselves as believers? I'm a believer in science and in reason. I believe very devoutly even that, and I have a great deal of faith in the ability of human beings to govern their own fate. And I think that perhaps we ought to resist the title non-believer. Do you?
Okay, so that word.
Question mark.
So like with many different words, a single word can have many different usages and connotations and context. So when we use the word believer, we're talking about people who believe in a transcendent world, who actually believe in ghosts and spirits and gods and that. So that's how we're using it. But the word belief can also be used as just sort of a secular, sort of philosophical commitment to something. I'm committed to this. I believe in love. I believe in freedom. We can say those things as well, which means we're not assessing some transcendent qualities to it. We're just committing ourselves to those. So I think most of our members would say, yes, they do believe in science. They do believe in reason, but that's the word belief is used in a totally different way. And the word faith and trust is the same thing. You can have faith and trust. I mean, our currency, the full faith and trust of the government, right? We're not putting blind faith into the government, but we're asserting a confidence is what we're doing. So yeah, I don't know if there's a direct answer to your question. I would say yes, if we use the word belief in that secular sense, then I also believe, just like you do, in social justice and in fairness and equality and all of those human rights. I believe in those things. But traditionally, the word believer in a religious context refers to those people who are theistic or supernaturalistic in some way. So I don't know if we're going to separate those out. We just have to be very clear when we use our language what we mean, I think.
But Peter, we have room for time for just two online, please.
All right. We have Richard Askins. I believe he's shifted computers. You got to unmute, Richard. You have to unmute. You need to unmute yourself, Richard.
Yes.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
There we go.
You need to speak up.
Oh,
Yeah,
am I muted?
we hear you.
Okay, I don't know, something screwy on our network this morning. Thank you, Dan. It was a lovely concert last night. What I'm impressed with this morning is just how much more you're doing in different areas. And I have a question, which is a legal question, which is probably pretty far out there. I know that people have sued the church for child abuse, sexual abuse. I'm wondering if a government entity could be sued for its promotion of religion based on child abuse that wasn't quite that severe, but included lots of beatings and threats of abandonment or even abandonment.
Well, we would sue the government. And by the way, that's all we sue. We don't sue churches or individuals. We would sue the government if there was a direct connection, either through legislation or policy or practice, of the government actually accommodating or facilitating or helping or excusing this abuse in some way. If we could find that nexus, yeah, we could maybe take a lawsuit. The suits that we see against the churches are civil suits for the damages that have been occurred, and it's just horrible. I debated Cardinal George Pell in Australia about 10 years ago, after the allegations came out that he was molesting young boys, but before he was convicted. So during the debate, I was not able to bring that up. It would have been ad hominem. But later he was convicted. He spent some time in jail, and then the Catholic Church ferried him off to the Vatican to become the treasurer of the Vatican. And you probably know that Cardinal Pell died just last month. He was convicted, but the Supreme Court of Australia overturned that. So he was convicted on criminal charges. So you can do that. If you have individuals within the church that are committing criminal actions, well, then you can go after them if you can find them. If the church even lets us know about those people, you can do those kinds of things. But it was funny after our debate. I wrote a story about it, which appears in this month's Free Thought Today. After the debate, we were supposed to pose, I and the atheist student leader, and then Cardinal Pell with the Catholic Church. But when we were walking to get the picture taken, Cardinal Pell said, I don't want my picture taken with that man. And he walked away. So there's a photograph of 3 of us without Cardinal Pell. And actually, I took it as a compliment. You know what I mean? I took it like, wow, I must have said something in the debate that got him, you know. And you can see that debate online, by the way, if you go look for Cardinal George Pell and Barker debate in Australia. We just to repeat, we could potentially go after a government if we can seek some complicity. Something similar happened in Ireland, where the police was actually working with the priests on this issue. And so it wasn't just the Catholic Church, they were in cahoots with the government. And so you see how quickly Ireland is now modernizing. Now they're losing priests. They were the first country by referendum to legalize gay marriage, and they overturned an abortion law in that Catholic country. The people, and part of the spearhead of that was the Atheist Ireland group, who was always out on the streets pushing like that. So in that case, they did have a nexus with the government to go after the government, because you could show that connection. So if you can show it, then let us know about it. Maybe we could make a case. You need a plaintiff, obviously. You need somebody who's injured, so that you can go into court for something like that. I think it's kind of rare that would happen, but maybe it could.
We have one more, Kurt.
That's it, one more.
Okay, Wes Matsui.
Hello, Dan. This is Wes Matsui. I attended your concert last night, and I had the inkling that you may have been a musical prodigy, because I think it was expressed in your piano playing. So my question is, if you were to sketch out a song cycle that represented your days as that youthful, righteous, evangelical preacher, the period where you were transitioning, or whether that was a period of the Valley of Doubt or this burning right of reason, and then coming out onto the other side where it seems like you're, a road warrior. What would that song cycle look like? What kind of music would that be? Or maybe you've already, done a collection of songs that represent that. But I get this picture of this. There's been a massive journey that you've taken, and I'm just curious as to how that would be represented musically.
So you're right. I have written some pieces of that in song. You heard some of them last night, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but I never thought about what you're saying. Maybe there's something there. Maybe we should talk about it.
Dan Barker, the opera.
Maybe.
What do you think?
Did you hear what he said? Dan Barker, the opera. Because there's drama there, and I'm not the only one. As I told you before, in the Clergy Project, we now have more than 1,200, almost 1,300 former clergy, rabbis, imams, monks, nuns, professional religious workers who have now left the ministry. And they all tell a similar story. Most of them say it was intellectual. A few of them say it was like social. They didn't like the way the church was treating gays or women or that. A couple of them said it's emotional, but most of us said it was an intellectual struggle as we learned more and studied more about the Bible, religious history, and philosophy, that it just didn't make sense to us. So can you make a musical out of a philosophical struggle? Maybe that could be done. Maybe some of you have some ideas, but thanks for the suggestion.
Great. Thank you for your questions. In a room with so many intellectuals and online with about 80 people, you can see we had to cut things off. You all have good ideas, but I'm sure he'll stay a little bit afterwards for questions, and there's coffee and people can approach him there. Please let him get some coffee first, okay? Let's do that. And your program are all the people who make this possible. And thanks to all of them. I'm not going to take a moment now to mention it. Thanks to Joel, who mentioned to me about Senator Whitehouse. I believe he's in Rhode Island, who also wrote the book on the kind of a conservative takeover. The scheme, right? Conservative takeover. So you can read those things. We are continuing our series next week. We have 2 young adults from the Religious Freedom Forum who are actually coming from the other side of the argument, because we want to make sure we're hearing from all sides, who are going to be speaking on should there be no public accommodation for religion, and they're going to give their take on it. And we hope that you can come and participate with that as well. We put all these things on and bring all these people in the room with your generous donations. There's a basket that's going right now. Anything with famous presidents on that, feel free to throw that in there. We appreciate any of your support that you could possibly give to that. I do want to call out thanks to Eric and Michael and Melissa for this lovely music. We're going to let them play here in just about 1 second to kind of bring us to a closure. Are there any extremely important announcements I'm forgetting at this moment? Yes, sir.
Yes, just like to announce a commercial for the free.
Here you go, use this so people online can hear you.
Free commercial for FFRF. Their TV show in this area is on Channel 11 at 10 a.m. Sunday mornings. So I had to cut it short today to get here. 10 a.m. Sunday morning.
And is it recorded in case those who come here can then go and hear that? Yes. And you could go to the Freedom from Religion Foundation and look at their website. Did you have a quick announcement? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Esther Sandroff. I'm the finance chair of the Ethical Culture Society. We're ending the month of February. This is the end of our pledge drive. And for those of you members who have not pledged yet for this year, please do so now. We need to know, we depend on the pledges to run the society and to run this great programming, but we need our members to let us know how much they're going to pledge for the year so we can keep everything going. And thank you.
And Peter will put on online how people can donate online as well for that. I'm now going to ask Eric and his musicians who've come together to play some concluding piece of music, brief closing words, and then we're done.
Will you introduce the song?
Well, this is a song that I wrote, and it's a song about a philosophical struggle. So there we go. We'll bring it around. This is a song entitled "There's a Tree on a Hill."
There's a tree on a hill. It's covered with snow. Its branches are frozen and bare. It's the place we would meet when our love was sweet. Her fingers she'd run through my hair. We'd lie beneath the stars so bright till the first sign of morning light shone in real time, and then she'd slip away with one parting kiss, and I'd watch her run through the haze. And then I'd return home as if no one had known, till the stars chased the sun away. We'd lie beneath the stars so bright, till the first sign of morning light shone in real time, and then she'd slip away with one parting kiss, and I'd watch her run through the haze. And then I'd returned home as if no one had known, till the stars chased the sun away. Till the stars chased the sun away. Thank you.
Lovely. My closing words come from a very wise person who said, how many centuries will it take us before we realize there are no magic forces in nature, no watchful eyes in the skies? A single plow is much more effective than 100 prayers a day. The hands that help are better far than lips that pray. And those were his words and his poem. It is one of his pieces of music. So thank you for that. Have a great morning, everyone. Thank you for
Hang on
coming
one
out.
second. Excuse me, Kurt. Kurt.
I was wondering Ingersoll that last time.
I'm trying, Ed.
That last time was Ingersoll.
Well, Kurt, Ed, why don't you say it to us? You can unmute yourself right now.
There we. Okay, there we go. Well,
Sorry, Ed.
that's all right. I just wanted on behalf of the membership committee to thank everyone who came out this morning, either in person or I guess in this case, only to the people who are Zooming along with me. If any of you are new to ethical culture, you should know that this wonderful morning is not unusual for us. We have lots of great speakers, and Kurt himself is a wonderful speaker who we hear frequently. And if you'd like to learn more, please go online or visit in person. We're a very friendly group, and we'd love to get to know you and have you get to know us better. So thanks everyone who, especially those who are far away, whether you're in an hour away or a continent away like the Carps. So good morning to everyone from the membership committee.
Thank you, Ed. I will now ask all to unmute if you'd like to chat a little. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Thanks so much for this. And the concert last night. What a great weekend. Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I was just gonna say I'm jealous of the people who were physically there last night because I'm here in Maryland, but Dan Barker is my favorite. Just a got to hear him live.
Guys, I'm gonna head out. Have a good day.
Hey, Joe. Hey, have a great one. Peace.
I was talking about the turn of the Supreme Court and so forth. Has anybody read Democracy in Chains? Lays out the whole multi-decade arc. Yeah. Why were we not paying attention earlier?
I'm gonna get off. Have a nice weekend.
Richard, I see you trying to talk, but I don't know what your internet is doing.
Bye-bye, Gloria. Take care.
Thank you.
Can't hear you, Richard. Must be some kind of network issue.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. It happens.
Frustration, yeah.
Technology making our lives easier. Yeah.
Happened to that. Well,
Yeah, it says you're unmuted. It must be your microphone.
Yeah,
I don't know. You use sign language.
type in the chat. Okay.
Peter, can you hear me right now?
I hear you fine, Julie.
Okay, so we're on the same, well, just trying to troubleshoot in my mind.
Only allowing one Askins at a time.
Right, I'll drop off and see if you get him again.
I think he's dropped.
Oh, okay. Well, sorry.
Yeah, maybe the microphone.
Yeah,
That's all I can think of.
yeah. Thanks.
I think I'm gonna, does anybody, I think I'm gonna shut down the room. I gotta go see mom and
Okay.
dad, but if anybody has any burning desire.
No, we're good.
Okay,
Catch you next time. Thanks.
great seeing all of you. Be well. Happy Sunday.
Yep. Bye. Peace out.